Well, hello there everyone, my name's Mikey, welcome back to my room. It's time for another tutorial, and today we're going to be covering how to draw the body or the torso and hips area for your anime and manga characters. Now bear in mind we're going to be using some very basic shapes as our building blocks to make this as simple and as easy as possible for you guys. So these rules can apply for the female form and torso, as well as a little bit of bum and thigh as well, for any of your character designs and any type of illustration, or even if you're just really looking for a bit of a breakdown for anatomy in general. So I'm going to go ahead with a few examples. Of course, if you want to keep up at home, then grab yourself a few sheets of basic printer paper or anything that you can grab your hands on. Don't wait for the good stuff. I've got a super cheap disposable mechanical HB pencil right here, and of course a rubber for when the time is right. Now, I have done a video before, guys, on how to draw hips and torso, and in that video I sung the Shakira lyrics for about 12 seconds to The Hips Don't Lie, and that video has subsequently been claimed and monetized by 37 different other companies. So let me just say thank you so much, YouTube, for protecting the creators that build the very content that makes your platform happen. I really love the amount of support that YouTube gives to its content creators. Yeah. So I thought what we could do, guys, is start off over on the left hand side, and we're going to take a look at a standing front on torso and a little bit of hips and thigh areas, just so that we can break down those difficult zones again. We're not going to go perfectly front on. I think we're going to make it a little bit jaunty, just so that we can describe the form in a slightly more interesting way. So have a go and see if you can keep pace. Now, one of the first things to generally do for me personally is a center line or a weight line, or even just a line that might slightly describe the curve of the spine of your characters. But basically, I'm just going to sweep down here, and I'm going to just kind of sweep in a bit in this direction, and then I'm just going to sweep down like so in a slightly more contrary curve, and basically I'm going to have my torso of a character up here and a little bit of legs going down there. I will of course keep my construction lines much darker than I usually do in real life as well, just so that it comes up fairly clearly for you guys on the camera. Don't worry too much about this center weight line. This is a bit of a guide for us to build things on top of. Now I'm going to imagine that the shoulders for this character are going to be sweeping here, and I'm going to put a bit of angle on that, make it a little bit jaunty, and in a very similar way I'm going to imagine the hips to this character are going to be somewhere over here. So again, I'm putting in another line at another angle that's kind of just making sure these two contradict each other and help to balance out our overall character piece. It turns out, somebody told me, there's actually a term for this. It's called, and I'll need the gesture, contrapposto, which is the idea that the shoulders go in a particular angle, but the hips balance it out by doing the opposite thing. Now, the way that we build up a torso is to split it into two different sections. Now, there's the top section, which is going to represent the rib cage, and this, guys, is basically like a great big egg. I just imagine that. I fill up most of the top half of the area with this egg shape, and I'm just going to actually track relatively slowly around this line, just so that it does come up fairly clearly for you guys like so. We are of course keeping things a little bit rough and ready, just so that we can get the ideas across, but I might not be making some really brilliant pieces of art right now. And then down on this line here, now that we've got our hanging egg chest area, we're going to be creating another elliptical shape, but this one's flatter. This one's side on, and in females that are developed, they're going to be a little bit wider as well. So I'm just going to sweep another kind of elliptical shape around here, just like so, and then doing a very similar curve down here. This bottom part of the curve, you'll notice I've got much flatter than the top part, and this kind of represents, if you imagine, a bit of a bucket shape for our hips. Now, when it comes to these two curves, what some people do like to do is just imagine these as if they were a kind of big rectangular box shapes, just so that it can help understand the direction that they're looking at everything. So what I'm getting at here is if I imagine that this chest is actually sitting inside of a box, and I don't always draw this box, but sometimes it's helpful just to see it, guys. Just like so. And then back, we're looking at the side of our box shape here. You'll notice because it's tilted back, we're going a little bit underneath. And really that helps me understand this overall rib cage form. We're looking down the front of the chest here, and that the actual rib shape does sort of sweep off like so, and sweep off like so down there. And also in a very similar way, the bucket shape of the hips can actually be coming a bit towards us as well in another angle as we kind of look down towards them. So in this instance, I might just put the top description of a box somewhere over here, like so, and throw that whole thing back like this. And I'm overemphasizing the angle of this box just to really pull everything out and keep it looking nice and dynamic with a stance. But it does mean the front portion of this particular character maps a line up here, and then in the back we've got our kind of spine line that joins this together. And we can imagine a line down the front that might be the front center part of the tummy, just sweeping down, maybe goes in a little bit about here where we've got a belly button shape, just like so. And what you can do is really think to this bottom part, I should say, of the rib cage, down to about our kind of front corners of this overall bucket shape. So this is a big bucket, which is the hips. We're looking down into the top of that space, and it's all sweeping and curving in towards the middle bottom center with the overall flow. This line here and this line here helping me describe the point at which the hips meet onto the legs, but we'll come back to that. Like I was saying, going from these bottom parts of the overall rib cage down to these front areas of the torso help us really map out the abdominal wall and where all of those tummy muscles are going to be sitting in our character as well. So a bit up here and a bit like that, just down like so. Here's our tummy area, of course, all sweeping down and in. And then we can just build up these edges by understanding, okay, these hips around about here actually have a hard edge because over here and over here are the hip bones, which aren't going to kind of squeeze and deform. They're not soft like the rest of the character. These guys are going to stay in place, and we can use that as a bit of a jumping off point to understand we're going to get a little bit of the lateral side of this character sweeping up, but really everything's meeting up to the edge of our rib cage shape over here as it comes up to the rest of the torso. And maybe along this line I'll put a circle in around about here to represent one rough shoulder area, and a circle slightly overlapping the side here to represent where we'd have the other shoulder for this character. And then coming down the back past here, there's going to be all the muscles of the back and the sides for all of your pull-ups and bits. So that sweeps in, connects this whole joint socket area into the back area of the rib cage. And coming down on this side, we are going to allow this area here between our top area and our bottom zone to be the thinnest part of our character. This is essentially where that waist measurement line comes in. So we're going to sweep down in, following all that curve to the waist, understanding that there's muscle around the side of this character, and then it's going to sweep down and start to make up some of that hip. So that's what we're thinking about in the torso. I've used more construction lines than normal with those boxes in, but we're going to have some other examples which are going to look a little bit clearer and cleaner. But remember, we're starting off with our overall egg form here, one on its side over here, and this really splits the torso into two sections, and then we join those two sections together. Okay, great. So let's actually talk about this zone, because as mentioned, a few complex things are happening as it joins up to the legs. Now what I'm going to do is taking this sweep down here that I've got right down to the middle bottom section of the torso there. There's our bottom part of this torso of the character. And following this sweep back up here, I'm going to imagine that essentially the joints to the legs are here and here with this character. And I'm just going to very basically imagine the skeleton shape, or basically the femur, is going to be a bone that just comes down here, like so for this character. And then on this side I'm going to have it go inwards a little bit as well, because the femur bones of the legs do naturally go in as they go down towards the knees, and the body kind of follows a bit of that flow. And then I guess over here we can imagine here's a circle for our kneecap 1 and a circle for our kneecap 2. You'll notice as well this one's a little bit higher up than this one because of the hip line. This end's a little bit higher up than this end. Now the way I like to get things going here is work from the outside down towards the knee to start off with. So where we've got this leg joining in to this torso area here, and we've got our hip bone right here being pretty solid about things, the rest of the leg is going to come off from this point here. And this point is about halfway through the whole bowl section that we've been creating today. So I'm going to sweep out just ever so slightly. We won't make this character too thick in this example because I want to really just show off the shapes of these legs. So we're going to follow this line that sweeps down to the outside of my kneecap circle. So we're curving a relative bit right here, but then we're going a bit straighter and smoother with our line as we come to the outside edge down here. And then I might just put a bigger circle around this to kind of indicate all the area, even if this point here is really where we're describing the kneecap. And on this side of the character, instead of starting right about here, so just besides the privates down towards this leg, we're actually going to start right up near the front, right around where that abdominal wall comes down on this side. I'm going to go just slightly to the left to really represent where the front of the hip bone connects everything in. You've got loads of flexors and bits all connecting in this area. And I'm actually going to imagine a curve that sweeps out from there, sweeping down, meeting outside, or the inside edge I should say, down onto this knee like so. And there are completely different sets of muscles on the inside of the leg that sweep down now from here and band their way in as we come down on this leg. So I am certainly going to have a curve that bulges in towards the middle, a little bit here, but then again straightens out and sweeps in to the leg as it comes down here. But the main muscle on the front of the leg is up doing its own thing up towards this part here. So let's go down on this side. Let's obviously imagine that leg goes off the edge of the page. And then on this side here, we're just going to repeat that again. This leg facing a little bit more in towards us, however. So again, on this side, I'm just going to accentuate the curve of the hip, starting from about here, halfway in, where we've got our hip bone curve. And this one is going to be sweeping out a fair bit up by the top. And sometimes you might want that thickest part of the leg to roughly fall in line with the very bottom edge of the torso before it sweeps in. But down towards here, not quite to my circle, to the outside edge, but I've got a line which is longer and straighter on this part of the leg, and then sweeping up and getting much curvier on this outside edge line here. I'm just going to bring that curving line down and in. And then in a very similar vein, here's my abdominal wall area. Halfway between that and the outside edge is probably where the hip flexors all join in right up here on the leg. So I'm going to imagine ever so slightly coming in from there as I then sweep out and down, quite generously going out of course, and bring myself around right on the inside edge there of that line curve as well. So I'm going to bring this up, sweep it back, and of course the inside muscles of the leg are going to again come off of this point here and meet on the inside as well for everything that we've got going on. So we do have a nice thick meaty thigh here, but we have described a little bit separately the front again before we've padded everything out. So then on this leg, I think this entire joint section is the top part. It'll probably be the under parts of the kneecap just showing down there, and really everything else is probably going to sweep out like this on this character. But again, it's going off the bottom of the page. We don't need to worry about it too much. And then up here for the rest of your torsos, depending on what type of character you're drawing, you might have more or you might have less of some kind of boob in that zone. But it's not a boob tutorial, so we're not going to worry too much there. So these are all of the different things that I tend to think of in the construction process of the torso, especially around that difficult hips, legs, thigh joint area. I'm going to have another go. I'm not going to include the boxes this time. I'm going to go a little bit more directly into how I do things now that you guys understand what's happening overall. So we've done the front, guys. Let's take a look at the back. Again, we're just going to focus a bit further down the torso on this occasion. So I'm going to just have my hips line right up here this time, something like that. And then I'm going to get in that entire hip zone. So again, that's a big elliptical shape that kind of sweeps out and up more on the top than it does. Oh, I've just nudged the camera there. Let's just hold that still. Than it does with the bottom, kind of sweeping in like so. Again, just trying to build that line up a little bit more firmly for you guys. Notice I'm using lots of small sweeping gestures as I make my way around this shape, just to slowly build up the overall form, because it's not too important, they're really just guidelines. But if I did imagine this is the back of the spine, then this is kind of the bum area where the spine is going into the body before it goes up as it grows out of that whole lumbar region. The top bottom part of the chest rib cage area, barely going to see anything just off the top of the page, so I'm not too bothered there. But what I am certainly going to do is imagine again towards the bottom corners of our overall bucket, which is our hip area, that we're going to have maybe one leg going off down here, and then this leg maybe just a touch more straighter as it goes off down there. And now we're going to build some form out of those shapes. So again, thinking about a bucket, this time angled away from us, I'm going to give it slightly more of a straighter top edge over that zone. And I am going to imagine obviously that we've got the bum happening in here as well for this character. So I'm going to imagine that the hips of the front of the character, I should say, is pointing slightly to the left, which means I'm going to build up a lot of bum curve sweeping round over to the right as we do so. So center line of the spine, sweeping bit of bum shapes, probably going to come around here, and then it is going to curve more and more rapidly right at the bottom. So this is a gentle curve, and then we get curvier and curvier before we sweep straight in sideways and a bit back around. And we can also imagine a very similar thing for this part of the character as well. This is the gentle part around the top, but that curve sweeps in more and more as we start to go round and in towards the middle. Basically, think about the curve of the golden ratio as it sweeps in. If you can get the golden ratio happening in the bum, you're doing pretty well with your character design. Now again, I will just have the hips continue to sweep in just to show that middle hip line before they then go up and out for the rest of this character. But returning back down to this area, we are going to make sure that this part of the bum doesn't sweep all the way in. It's going to tuck up and back in towards the middle, and there's going to be maybe just a little bit of area here where you can see the flattened bottom part of the torso and privates area. Obviously this character is going to be wearing clothes, and then there's going to be that split gap in the middle as a result. So if we actually remove a little bit of this guiding circle, this area right here in the middle is going to be a little bit of negative space. Now again, I'm going to go about halfway into this torso situation and just start to have some fairly meaty thighs just come down here. You can make your characters a little bit thicker or a little bit thinner with how much curve you do and don't like to put into things. We're going to sweep right out as we imagine this line going down. I'm not going to go all the way down to the knee. We're just going to talk about how these thighs get described off the bottom. And again on here, I'm going to go not right from the middle. I'm going to go just in from the sides of the privates, imagining that the front of the torso again, oh, just giving it another nudge, I do apologize. Front of the torso again has this V shape sweeping down here. So that V is coming in here. It's probably coming actually that way because of how things are facing slightly off to the left. Our center line for this character in the front, probably sweeping down something like that. So anyway, as saying, this one is going to be a different sweep, still a slight curve coming in down that side, just like so. And then on this side of things, I'm going to be imagining the leg obviously is joined up at the hip slightly to the left, so I'm going to cut into this space just a little bit. And again, I'm going to bring that as a bit of a bulge to the curve just up here before I let that sweep down into the leg there. And on this side, from this halfway point, again, I'm really going to bring this out and around. This is going to be really thick. Out we go. And then really curving in as such. So let's just make that a finished form of leg there and there. But essentially you can see what's going on. So if you imagine that this character's wearing like some pants or underwear, and the hip line curves up and around here, but it goes in a little bit, divots in towards the back, because this area here is in towards the body, and then maybe obviously just hopping out like that, and maybe the other center edge of the underwear would be here, and then the pants line, say they're just really tight shorts, might sweep right up from this hip joint, right where the legs are doing all of the motion, cut across the bum cheek, and make their way down in towards the center down here, and then in a very similar vein as this sweeps up, out and in, back up there. The rest of the flesh kind of squeezing out the side. But again, when we go into time lapse, I'll put just a little bit of form onto that, just so hopefully it makes sense for you guys at home. So that's how we might look at things at the back if we're going to go super curvy, really dial up the thickness and have it so that the thighs are doing all of the action. Yeah, this character's got all sorts of bum going on as well, which is great, but really what's selling it is the curve of these hips as they go off. And if these legs were to just squeeze together into a shape, you get much more of that kind of pear-like curve as well as you go down. So again, let's talk about this from a completely different angle from the hips. Let's go from kind of underneath looking up towards the underside of the bum. So again, I'm imagining that my character is maybe sitting in a chair, but it's like a see-through chair, we can see up and through it, and the spine line is going up in that direction. So I'm going to imagine that the actual hips line is somewhere about here for this example, and then that bucket shape again, fairly large. Let's get that elliptical zone really roughly going like this, and in this example I'm kind of imagining that that bucket shape that makes up the hips going up to the spine, the front surface of it is going down here, but we're seeing right underneath it as well. So for example, all of the curves that kind of build up the body, they're right up here. Right up here is everything joins into the front of this zone. So this might be where the tummy line disappears up the middle there. Let's just go up there and imagine again that we've got those strong hip bones coming out the side, but we're probably not actually going to see much if any of this, so I'm not stressing too much. But remember, up on this side as well, this edge of this bucket shape we're seeing on here, and then the rest of our viewpoint is from a little bit lower. So again, I'm just kind of imagining that the legs in this instance, joints coming out from about down here, probably going to shoot off right across the front in this direction, and then probably very similar over there. So I'm going to imagine that what we've got to do is think about the overall bum zone for this particular joint, which is going to be something like this. It's going to come off the curve of the hips. Again, it's going to sweep down a little bit longer, and then it's going to really curve its way back round and in. So let's go just like so, like this, right down and around to about here. I've started a little bit up here, but we don't need to worry about that too much. Just get rid of that line and bring this one curving round and in. And then I'm imagining, as per this line, the entire cylindrical shape of that leg is coming off here. So you'll notice this part of the hip area still rock solid, still not going to move or collapse under anything. This part right here is going to be where the overall curve of that hip joint meets the flow of the leg. So I'm just imagining what that cylinder would do as it comes off here, shoots off to the left like that, and then in a very similar vein under here, there is still going to be a lot more curve right as we make our way down and come just a bit up in to join the bum. Sorry, just a bit up and in, I should say, to join the bum. So this is a big curve here. It sweeps, comes back up in here, and then we've got our bum shape that meets in here. So it does mean we're probably going to see just a little bit of maybe the front part of the underwear just here. So this will just be like the underside of knickers, for example, just there. And then thinking about this hip line along here, I'm also still thinking about that when I'm thinking about the area that the next part of the bum cheek's going to be in. So in a really similar zone here, I've probably got the next part of the meat or cylinder of the leg coming off and then doing its own thing up there. So I am just going to start to sweep in here. But then as well, we've got the rest of the bum to think about. So I'm going to continue off with another slightly separate curve, but I'm imagining still about here, more of a curve of a following circle that's going to sweep up on our character and be this part of the bum as well. So we've got our main part of meat in here. We've got this line up here describing where the kind of leg goes in. Now I wouldn't actually draw this line in, but I'm putting it here to kind of really just tell you guys where that leg's coming from, where it's joining in to the rest of this surface area, and really still just using the skeletal kind of basic framework system to map the overall directions of the character and what we're up to with them. And then down on this side as well, we've got that meat of the bum just down under there. Underside, like the bottommost edge of the torso is right here. This is a flat zone that would sit on the chair. And then again, we've got that other leg just coming off and doing its own thing. So I'm just going to perhaps again imagine that this, for the moment, is just some example legs that we'll come back to later perhaps. Okay, so let's have a look again at the kind of whole torso area here. Maybe a character lying down on their side in this particular example will hopefully be just another way we can have a thorough look at this. I'm just going to erase that little mark I've made there. Great. And with this, again, we're going to be using the hard parts of the body as our main anchor and reference point. So when you've got a body interacting or lying on a surface, things can kind of bulge down to a bit towards the gravitational area, and some bits are actually going to stay as part of the solid frame. Now, if we have a character that's going to be, say, kind of, I'm going to just get in the top of the torso, I think, here, guys, for you. I'm imagining a shoulder line which is slightly more upright. And then contrapposto, I'm going to imagine our hips area is here. And so roughly the center line or the spine of our character would probably come down from the neck zone here, go in this direction for a bit, just before it starts to sweep back up towards the hips. And then I'm sure we're going to have a leg that probably, we'll have one that goes away straight, and we'll have one that comes maybe just a little bit towards us as well as we kind of make our way along. So again, these lines are fairly light, don't worry about those ones, just guides telling me that the hips are in this direction and that the shoulders are in this direction. Those are the main two bits. So again, I'm just going to map him as light as I can, try not to smudge up here too much really, our overall rib cage area for this character, just like so. And again, I'm just going to make that a bit darker now, just like so, representing the rib cage. Rib cage is a solid form. I mean, there is expansion and contraction, sure, as you take a deep breath and let it out and so on, or let your diaphragm do the work, depends if you're an abdominal breather or not. But it is just going to be a bit of a solid point for us as far as we're concerned as illustrators or artists to build some of the musculature and other bits off of. I will just pop a shoulder circle in here, why the hell not, and another one up there. And then here again, let's talk about those hips. So they're nice and wide, they're already kind of lying on the ground area a bit. Here's my nice big happy curve going out the top part of this hip zone, and then here's the slightly less aggressive curve coming out the bottom part of that zone, like so. And then again, I can start to imagine things like, right, this is the front part of my hips bucket, which means the natural kind of curves and shapes of a body are on that V shape, which I'm just going to take down to here, and I'm also going to take up to here. I'm doing my best not to rotate the page, but instead rely on these basic shapes. I will have a look in just a moment, but let's see how far we can get with the character sideways just using these building blocks. So we've got our V in, and then that tells me that, okay, the center line of this tummy is probably going to be coming off or down around about here, and it's going to sweep off in this direction, and we're probably going to get a belly button zone somewhere around about there, as the rest of his front line goes down towards the privates. And again, I'm just going to mark out from these bottom edges of this rib cage shape down towards the kind of front areas of our hips, but at the edges at the front, this is going to be where maybe a bit of the abdomen's doing its work, kind of there. It's probably having to come back up and do all sorts of bits on this side. Something a little bit similar here, but maybe this line's a bit longer and smoother because there's contraction in this zone where these two areas are going together, and expansion in this zone where the bottom parts are coming apart. So let's just come up in here and then go down to about there. And again, I can actually imagine, okay, well, in that case then, here's the edge of our character in this shape, still into the middle part of the hips. I'm still going to go out a little bit with the tummy as we come down here, and on this part of the side we can kind of drop a fair bit in, and then everything else is building up to meet where we've got those hips. And then maybe, I think, something like the bottom part of the shoulder circles to around about this zone would be where the boobs are. But again, this isn't a boobs tutorial, so I'm probably not going to worry too much about it. Depends how we go towards the end. So let's have a look down on this side. We've got our tummy zone all coming in towards the center bottom part of our V, which is up here. We've got our area where the hips bucket is starting. We've got our hard hip zone here and our hard line here for the body. And then obviously we understand that this kind of area is the joint area where the limbs come off of. So again, if I imagine this leg is going off and it's kind of, actually let's start with the bottom part because everything will sit on top. Let's imagine this leg is actually coming towards us a little bit. So I'm going to contract the nature of the curves that I usually have going from the middle part of the section. So in this example, where this leg comes in, I'm going to actually curve here to show how it meets into the torso, because it is a cylinder which is not completely side on, but a bit more towards us, creating this kind of surface feeling. And I'm going to have that leg bulge up here a bit, just like so, and obviously a little bit down here on the floor as well as it comes out in our direction. So it's going to come off the hip, and then we're going to get the bulge that really is the overall meat of the leg more than anything else, slightly coming towards us as a viewer. The knee might be kind of over here somewhere. It's going to go in, and then you might get some inner curve that sweeps in over the joint area when you kind of tend to look a little bit more head on. But we're going to just let this curve sweep up and away and probably stop somewhere around about there for later use. And then on this side of the leg, in a very similar vein, I've got this inside curve here. I know what's going on with that travel, but this leg is just going to sweep in. Here's our inside bulge that we usually draw in as separate areas, but this isn't under tension or pressure as it's walking. It's all relaxed. So we get to go up to these just hip zones in the middle again, halfway from the top to bottom roughly, and start to build a curve that comes off of here as well. So I'm going to go up before I bother sweeping right the way down, like so. So just up from there. And again, just trying to clean that line a little bit for you guys down over there. So again, with this particular example, let's say it's a swimsuit or something like that. You can imagine the action area where the curve of the leg meets onto the hip is usually where the kind of side-on view of a swimsuit knot might come in. It might follow just under the bottom area of usual fat you get about here on tummies, and then just back up towards this part. And then the rest of it is going to help enunciate that curve, I should say, that sweeps here and follows the leg in there, just like that. So you've got one leg that's coming off relatively straight here, one leg that's coming well up in our direction here, and just you can see the way we've kind of contracted this bulge here and brought this sweep round a bit more. I'm going to give this a quick rotate not too bad at all. It does still look like a human shape, even if we look at it front on. So again, I've got the tummy area starting from about this zone. I understand it's taking up this area here as it goes around and helps us map towards the hips. So guys, what we've got there is the basic building blocks again. You've got your top ellipse, your bottom flatter ellipse, your center line or spine line that's going to help understand the weight and direction of your character. A little bit of contrapposto, as we imagine that any angle here is going to look better if it's counterbalanced by a different but equal angle in the hips. And the hips we're making wider than the shoulders in our anime characters to make them that little bit sexier and curvier. Sure, you can make characters that have got really big bums and really big bum curves, or you can make characters that have got clearly nicely defined bums, but actually make all of that meat and thickness occur in the thighs instead. It's completely down to you and how you like to draw your designs. So I'm going to drop into a little bit of time lapse really quickly, just clean this up, and I'll see you guys right at the end. Okay guys, and yeah, there we have it. What I wanted to do was just actually kind of imply the direction and surface area of some of these limbs and basic building block shapes, which is why I just wanted to kind of give you an idea of what's going on with the curve and the thickness of these thighs, as well as the fact that when it comes to doing the torso for your anime characters, don't be too intimidated. There really are some basic shapes that we can kind of break things down into. It's just about getting the line of the shoulders and the line of the hips and using that to just put in the bucket, which is going to be the overall hip area, and the egg-like ellipse, which is our overall chest area, and just bring these things together by joining them up using the tummy, bringing the sides in so that we've got a nice slim waist, and understanding that everything's going to grow out from some relatively stern or solid in place anchor points off of the hips, which is where we start to understand the curve and meat of the thigh as everything grows off. So as ever guys, this isn't what I'd call a full-on anatomy tutorial, but it is certainly a tutorial using basic shapes which are based off of anatomy themselves, and that's really how you're going to get the best kind of work when it comes to simple drawings for your humanoid characters, anime and manga, or just cartoons and illustration in general. Now, if you've liked this video, guys, of course, click subscribe, click that thumbs up button. It really helps me out. I'd really like to see you guys in the future for more stuff. But the reason why I make these tutorials for free on YouTube, you're not going to see me on like a Udemy advert or anything like that, is simply because if you like drawing, I want you to have the ability to draw. I don't want to put anything in the way of that because it's really like something that's close to my heart. I'm very passionate about it. But also I think it's got a load of therapeutic properties as well. I think getting into drawing can kind of take your mind out of life's other challenges sometimes. So the only reason I'm able to do this for free is thanks to my delicious patrons on Patreon. So let me give a quick shout out to Tom KG, Johnny T, Ken E, Immoral Muffin, Ezra LDC, Mazzino, Mad Duck, The Travelling Wolf, Joe R, Garrett C, Ryder 2KX, Michael S, Trent H, Gabriel C, Raymond G, Jorgen A, Wes B, Connor M, Julio Felix O, Rob, Kamari J, Cache Commando, Grizzly, Matthew G, Simon B, Gareth, Taylor S, Homongchi L, Thomas C, Angry Hermit, Johnny Y, Ollet, Gary, Christian L, Minion715, ICZ, Wendell S, Zahaki, Fatness, Rombley, Kurt D, Zotabor, LMA Gamer, and Ollie. You guys are some of the higher tier lot in Patreon. Thank you so much for your support as ever. There are loads of other patrons as well on my Patreon page where they get other artworks, all of my worksheets and other Q&As and things like that. So if you're ever interested, go check it out. And again, it's the only reason that this sort of stuff can happen. So I greatly appreciate you guys on there. Have yourselves a bloody lovely week, guys. Let me know what you want to learn about for next time round, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.